he lie. Everybody know he lie. But they be good lies though.
They do be good lies.
They be like great
the Tupac
lies.
picture.
That was one of the best.
The industry is there's a lot of snakes in it. Game was a snake that.
For years, Game's been out here spinning stories that just don't add up. And the craziest part is, it's not even the fans exposing him. It's other rappers. From flexing a clearly photoshopped picture with Tupac to claiming he wrote 50 Cent's What Up Gangsta, the drama just keeps piling up. But the real fire started when Game boldly declared that he actually wrote part of 50's classic track, What Up Gangsta. If you really know hip-hop history, you know how wild that statement is. That song wasn't just any track. It was the opener on Get Rich or Die Tryin', the album that announced 50 as untouchable, raw, and dangerous. That record set the tone for an era. So if someone's gonna claim they had a hand in that masterpiece, they better be ready to come with proof. When the question came up during an interview, 50's reaction told the whole story.
Extravagant lies we've ever heard in our lives on this episode.
I'm with you.
He didn't argue. He didn't even explain. He just laughed. His face and body language basically said, "Are you serious right now?" To him, What Up Gangsta was personal. His pen, his energy, his entire identity. Game wasn't part of that picture at all. And Tony Yayo, who was actually in the studio when the album was being crafted, didn't hold back either. His response was sharp. "You didn't write nothing. No sugarcoating, no polite phrasing, just straight facts." But this moment wasn't just a casual denial. It cut deep because according to 50, Game had zero involvement in What Up Gangsta. And more than that, his entire rise might not have even happened without 50 and Dr. Dre backing him. Dre handpicked the beats, 50 laid the hooks, and G-Unit sprinkled their features across the documentary. The entire structure was already built before Game even got in the booth. Think about it. Hate It or Love It and How We Do, two of Game's biggest records, were originally 50 Cent's tracks. They didn't just help him blow up, they practically created the foundation of his career. Dre's golden ear, 50's pen, and that G-Unit cosign launched him from Compton's underground straight into the mainstream. From West Side Story to Special, the blueprint was clear. So when Game later tried to rewrite history and act like he shaped 50's legacy or built his rise without Dre's and G-Unit's help, it wasn't just a small exaggeration. It was pure disrespect. You're talking about legends like 50 and Dre.
You photoshopped yourself on someone else and put a picture out with you and Pac.
It's Pac.
But it's not you. You heard him say Kanye did more for me in the last 2 weeks than Dr.
Men who guard their legacies fiercely. That's why Game's claim shook the room so hard. This wasn't fans doubting him. This was his former allies calling him out publicly. And once you open that door, people start asking, okay, so what else has he been lying about? That question leads straight to one of the wildest chapters of Game's self-mythologizing, the night he got shot. If the fallout with 50 made people suspicious, his ever-changing survival story made everyone raise their eyebrows even higher. For years, Game has told the story of how he was shot inside his home back in 2001. According to him, he was ambushed, hit multiple times, slipped into a coma, and woke up days later with a newfound dedication to rap. On the surface, it's the kind of powerful redemption arc hip-hop loves, a near-death experience that transforms a man into a legend. But the issue isn't whether he got shot. That part's documented. Hospital records and news reports confirm it. The problem is how the story keeps changing like a script being rewritten for a movie. One time he says it was 5 shots. Another time it jumps to 7. Sometimes he claims he was bleeding out on the floor for hours. In another version, his brother rushed in immediately and saved him. Even the length of the coma switches up. 3 days in one version, several weeks in another. When details shift that often, it stops sounding like raw truth and starts feeling staged. Then came the lyric that exposed a serious crack. I woke up out the coma 2001. That's the line. But here's the issue. Dr. Dre's album 2001 dropped in 1999. The math doesn't match. And when your whole image is built on authenticity, slip-ups like that aren't small. They blow up into major credibility issues. Even industry figures like Joe Budden couldn't resist clowning him, pointing out how his timeline magically adjusts every time he tells it. To many, it wasn't about questioning whether he survived. It was about whether he was trying to turn his experience into the West Coast version of 50's 9-shot legend. And when your personal story becomes your entire brand, every inconsistency makes people question everything else you say.
Said he wrote What Up Gangsta?
What Up Gangsta,
Yeah, I'm like, come on, bro. He wasn't even around when we did that. Like, that was before you even came into the picture. Like, that's Get Rich or Die Trying. He didn't even...
Coming to after that.
Yeah, we didn't even know.
By this point, Game had already stacked up 2 major credibility hits. First, inflating his role in 50's success. Second, twisting the details of his near-death story. But then came the most shocking move of all. Years later, Game didn't just bend the truth. He took aim at the very man who built his career, Dr. Dre. By then, Game had already faced heat over his origin stories, his shooting, and his connections to Kanye and Dre. You'd think he'd keep it clean, but instead, he made one of the most controversial statements of his career. It started with a comparison to Kanye West that spread like wildfire across interviews and social media. Game claimed something that fans and insiders alike considered a straight betrayal, because whether you believe every part of his stories or not, one thing is undeniable. Dr. Dre was the architect behind Game's rise. Dre signed him to Aftermath in 2003, handed him elite production, gave him mentorship, and strategically positioned him next to 50 and G-Unit. With Jimmy Iovine backing the vision, Dre crafted the rollout that pushed Game into rap history. The result? The documentary, a 5-time platinum album, Grammy nods, and a permanent place in the game. None of that happens without Dre. So when Game made that statement, the hip-hop world reacted instantly. Tony Yayo didn't mince words. He reminded Game publicly, "You have a career because of Dr. Dre. You even said on record, 'What the F am I without a doctor?'" For someone whose entire career was jump-started by Dre's machine, turning around and making those kinds of claims wasn't just reckless. It felt like straight-up betrayal to the people who built him. Dre track, so what are you talking about? That line from Tony Yayo hit like a bullet. To Yayo and countless fans, Game's comment wasn't just reckless, it was straight-up ungrateful. But the real question is, why would he even say something like that? Many point to the lingering tension from the 2022 Super Bowl halftime show, a moment that brought Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Kendrick Lamar, and even 50 Cent together on one of the biggest stages in hip-hop history. Everyone was there, except Game. His absence spoke volumes. At first, Game played it cool, pretending he didn't care. But later, in podcasts and interviews, the truth slipped out.
That word was music that I made with Dre, not with Game movies. How We Do, Hate It or Love It, Church for Thugs, Special, Higher, West Side.
He admitted the Super Bowl snub cut deep, leaving him feeling abandoned by both Dre and 50. That infamous "Kanye did more for me" line wasn't about facts. It was about pain bubbling over. But no matter the reason, the damage was done. Even when Game tried to walk it back later, blaming it on alcohol or trying to say he still considered Dre a blessing, the moment had already left a scar. He admitted Dre opened doors no one else could. He admitted he should have shown more grace. But in hip-hop, once you cross a legend, especially your own mentor, there's no taking it back. For fans, this wasn't just hurt talking. It was yet another crack in Game's already shaky credibility. First, he clashed with 50. Then the shooting story unraveled. Now he was taking shots at Dre. Each controversy chipped away at his image bit by bit. Instead of looking like a survivor or a rebel, he started to look like a man rewriting his own history to stay relevant. And just when people thought he might try to lay low, he made another move that backfired badly. Trying to keep himself tied to West Coast royalty, Game decided to lean on Tupac's legacy. But instead of doing it respectfully, he fumbled it completely. A Photoshop picture started circulating online.
Same time Dre dropped 2001. Game lyric, right?
Yeah, that was a lyric.
Are you about to tell me
Wait.
that 2001 didn't come out in
It
2001?
did not.
Came out in 90.
Game and Tupac standing shoulder to shoulder, as if they'd crossed paths in real life. At first glance, some fans actually believed it. If it were real, it would have been a power move, cementing Game as Pac's spiritual heir. But the internet doesn't miss. Fans started zooming in, picking apart every pixel. The shadows didn't line up. Pac's chain looked like it was badly pasted on. The proportions were off. Within hours, the photo was exposed as fake. One fan summed it up perfectly. "It's Pac, but it's not you." What was supposed to be a powerful tribute flipped into a viral meme. Blogs roasted it, forums lit up, and suddenly, Game looked desperate, like he was forcing a connection that wasn't real. The timing couldn't have been worse. He just alienated Dre. His credibility was sliding. And now this, even Tupac's most loyal fans, who usually embrace tributes, spoke out with disappointment. To them, Pac wasn't just a legend, he was sacred. Manipulating his image, even with good intentions, felt wrong. As one fan said, if Pac was alive, he wouldn't need Photoshop. That single comment captured the backlash perfectly. Real recognizes real, and this move didn't feel real at all. But here's the twist. Not everything Game did was about lying or beefing. Some moves came from something deeper, the need to stay relevant in a constantly shifting game. That hunger pushed him to latch onto bigger names and new movements.
He's hurt.
See, in hip hop, we very rarely do we look past the.
He moved from Dre's shadow, past Pac's ghost, and straight into the orbit of two massive names, Kendrick Lamar and Eminem. And with Game, these kinds of connections always turn into tension. Feuds are just background noise for him. They've defined his career. Look at Kendrick. In the beginning, there was nothing but respect. Kendrick even gave Game a salute on Black Boy Fly, describing how he watched Snoop pass the torch to him, acknowledging Game as part of that West Coast lineage. They collaborated, shared stages, and for a while, it seemed like Game had found his place as the bridge between eras. But Game has a history. Respect is never enough for him. Eventually, whispers started spreading that he was downplaying Kendrick's skills, whether out of competitiveness, jealousy, or simply the need to keep his own name buzzing. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because the same thing happened with Eminem. At first, Game couldn't praise M enough. He called him the only rapper nobody wants a problem with, and even admitted, "I used to think Eminem was better than me." But years later, he flipped the narrative. Suddenly, he was challenging Eminem to a versus, brushing off his relevance and dropping slick disses that sounded more like calculated stunts than genuine smoke. This cycle, admiration turning into rivalry, is at the heart of Game's story with both Kendrick and Eminem. It reached a peak during the Kendrick versus Drake feud when Game threw his full support behind Drake, calling him his brother while skipping a West Coast unity show Kendrick hosted. With Eminem, he tried to bait one of hip-hop's most untouchable figures into a battle that never happened. In both cases, the result was the same. Game ended up on the outside looking in. So when Kendrick Lamar hit that stage at the 2022 Super Bowl halftime show alongside Dre, Snoop, and Eminem, the world was watching, and Game was nowhere to be found. Left out, again, and he didn't hide the sting either. He later admitted that it hurt, even going as far as calling Kendrick a safe pick. That jab didn't go unnoticed. It added another layer to the growing list of moments where admiration turned into resentment. Then came his shot at Eminem. Game thought a diss would shake the internet.
You
That's not
photoshopped
fair.
yourself on someone else and put a picture out with you and Pac.
It's Pac.
But it's not you.
He expected chaos, headlines, and debates, but M's reaction? Pure silence. He casually brushed it off during an Instagram live, barely giving it any oxygen, while fans roasted Game for trying too hard to get a reaction. This moment sealed a pattern people had been noticing for years. Game takes genuine respect and turns it into rivalry. He stirs drama, not always because there's real smoke, but because he knows controversy keeps his name in people's mouths. Sometimes it sparks buzz, other times it backfires, but every single time it reinforces the same image. A talented rapper whose toughest opponent is his own need to stay relevant. And just when you think the pattern stops, another twist hits. Game got publicly called out by a rapper named Spar who claimed he paid for a feature that Game never delivered. Then a fan chimed in online saying, "Game charging $4,000 for a verse? Bro is down bad." That comment went viral. To some, this wasn't the same Game who once stood as a proud West Coast giant. This looked like an artist hustling just to keep afloat. The accusations piled up fast, and with each new claim, the gap between his glory days and his present reality widened. Some saw it as business, others saw desperation. Either way, it painted a picture no one expected. The man who once symbolized Compton pride was now being questioned in ways fans never imagined. But controversy alone wasn't what made people doubt his legacy. There was another habit, one that had followed him from day one, that was finally catching up to him: name dropping. After the $4,000 incident, the pattern became impossible to ignore. First, it was credibility, then loyalty, now reputation. And at the center of it all was Game's constant tendency to bring up other legends. Here's where it gets wild. Game publicly claimed he didn't need to name drop, but that's exactly what he's known for. Over the years, he built a reputation for constantly mentioning heavyweights like Dr. Dre, 50 Cent, Eminem, and others. In the beginning, it came off like genuine respect.
$1,000 for a verse. So I made a beat for him to rap over, and he was going to record a verse and then send it back to me for $4,000. I thought it was legit because I previously paid him to post one of my new songs.
A hungry rapper from Compton paying homage to the giants who inspired him. But over time, those shoutouts turned into a habit. And then a punchline. Fans noticed, rappers noticed, memes flooded timelines. What started as respectful nods slowly began to sound like a crutch. Instead of standing tall on his own legacy, Game started to look like he was leaning on others to keep his name alive. The vibe shifted. Fans began asking whether it was still about lyrical ability or if his identity was too tied to the shadows of other legends. What started as homage eventually turned into ridicule. His name drops weren't harmless anymore. They became part of the story people told about him, shaping his image and, in some cases, undermining it. From Dre to 50, from Pac to M, contradictions and debates followed like a trail. Fans and peers started dissecting every word, every claim, every lyric, trying to figure out where the truth ended and the embellishment began. The more Game talked, the more closely people listened. Every boast was weighed against his past. Every story was cross-checked. What once felt like myth-making started to look like myth-stretching. And that brings us to the real question. How will Game's legacy be remembered? Will it be about his undeniable lyrical skill, influence, and the role he played in bringing West Coast rap back to the mainstream? Or will it be remembered for the chaotic, often exaggerated narratives that surrounded his name? The truth is, it's both. His career is a wild mix of raw talent, cultural impact, and messy storytelling that continues to keep fans debating. A legacy built on both fact and fiction, where authenticity and embellishment collide, leaving people constantly guessing who the real Game is behind all the headlines.